Hello, my name's Olurotimi Osha. I like talking about American presidents, and I'm continuing with my discussion regarding uh, the allegations against the Trump administration, claiming that our 45th and 47th president is the most despotic or authoritarian president we've ever had, and he's apparently acting like a king. In fact, there was a on October 18, 2025, there was a No Kings protest. Prior to that, I think in summer around June, there had been another, similar protest against kings. And I'd done an earlier video which got really long, just saying that, well, I wouldn't say that Donald Trump is the most authoritarian or most despotic president we've ever had, and I, referred us to presidential annals to show us that we've actually had presidents in the past who uh, acted in more authoritarian and autocratic fashion. Today, I'm going to, you know, again, pivoting on the theme that nothing is new under the sun. Again, that's a quote from Ecclesiastes uh, chapter 1, verse 9. I like doing that because today's Sunday. I was in church today. And so, and of course, it just means that history repeats itself. Nothing is new under the sun, right? What has been, what is happening now has been before. And so I'm going to draw attention to what's going on in Venezuela, the government's apparent actions with respect to Venezuela. In the previous video I did, I mentioned the strikes between September and October by U.S. military, the military strikes ordered by the president, which destroyed about 10 vessels along the off the coast of Venezuela, and the administration described the casualties as being narco terrorists. And of course, I the parallel I found in history was uh, the uh, the armed invasion, the marine invasion ordered by President Woodrow Wilson in 1914, where the U.S. Marines actually invaded Haiti and withdrew $500,000 in gold from the Haitian National Bank and went to deposit it in a private U.S. bank in New York, the predecessor of Citibank, for safekeeping. And by the way, what I didn't mention is a year after, there was a full-scale military occupation, invasion, and occupation of Haiti, and America would be in Haiti for 19 years. Today, I'm going to refer us back to President Trump's first administration. There was an action that occurred in the first administration of President Donald Trump, but around May 3rd and May 4th, 2020, what has been described as, colloquially as the Bay of Piglets, uh, in which there was a foiled attempt to overthrow uh, President Nicolas Maduro's government and actually capture Nicolas Maduro, right, and capture him by, it was foiled. And again, as I said, uh, I can find parallels in history. It's, this incident was, this foiled uh, coup was dubbed Bay of Piglets. Of course, its origin is the Bay of Pigs. It happened about 59 years before that time. In April 1961, President Kennedy had ordered, the Bay of Pigs, in which about 1,400 Cuban exiles working with the CIA and the mafia had invaded Cuba in a foiled uh, attempt to overthrow the government of Fidel Castro. Um, and however, let me just mention that again, nothing is new under the sun. So the government has disavowed any involvement in what has also been called Operation Gideon, right? So the Bay of Piglets has also been labeled Operation Gideon. Uh, the U.S. government, that's the May 3 and May the 4th, 2020 attempt to overthrow Nicolas Maduro's government, which was foiled. The U.S. government has denied any involvement in that operation. However, back in the 60s during President Kennedy's administration, the government also disavowed any involvement in the Bay of Pigs. Uh, Today, we know the U.S. government ordered the Bay of Pigs because of declassified information that was made available by the CIA in the 1990s, right? So that's when we became uh, conversant with the involvement, the admission of the U.S. government's involvement in the Bay of Pigs. So who knows? Maybe in the future, when information's been declassified, the government may admit to its involvement in Operation Gideon or the Bay of Piglets, the less flattering Bay of Piglets nomenclature. But anyway, let me just briefly discuss, Operation Gideon, just to leave that for the archives. It's all over the internet. I watched an interview of the architect, the mastermind of the Bay of Piglets. His name is Jordan Goudreau, and he is a former Special Forces, U.S. Army Special Forces. He's a 49-year-old now, and I just listened to him talk, and of course he was naming he mentioned the involvement of the CIA. He didn't name any specific CIA officer, and the person he named that was affiliated with President Trump was the director of Trump's security. His name's Keith Schiller. Uh, Interestingly, the journalist who was interviewing Jordan Goudreau, he seemed to be dismissing the Keith Schiller guy. He called him Trump's bodyguard, and so this is uh, Jordan Goudreau, the architect of the foiled coup attempt, um, appears to be name calling and using Keith Schiller as validation of the government's involvement and Trump's involvement. And I'm astonished that he doesn't seem to realize that you can be working in government, you can even be working in the CIA, but if you're just a security guy in the CIA, you're not seeing classified material. There's just stuff, there are assignments that are above your pay grade, and an invasion of a foreign government and attempted overthrow of a foreign leader would certainly be above the pay grade of 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 Donald Trump's bodyguard, or no matter, even if it's his director of security, his personal security, right? Not national security. The Jordan Goudreau guy seems really, really off. He was citing Monroe Doctrine, and this guy needs to be talking to somebody. I'm always very respectful of people who've served the country, but again, everybody should stick to their lane, right? You should stick to your lane. You've served the country, and people, could tell you, thanks for your service, and of course, you should be taken care of, as a veteran. You should get your paychecks, and things like that. But people should stick to their lane, and when you start to bloviate and go beyond what your abilities allow you, it becomes a problem. People start to think you might be delusional and you need to be speaking with someone, a shrink. So this Jordan Goodrow is actually citing, and today's Sunday, so I want to be really respectful and peaceful. But again, I analyze things. Um, so Jordan Goodrow uh, was citing the Monroe Doctrine as justification for what he was doing, and without realizing the Monroe Doctrine has long since been disavowed. It's no longer in effect. It's sort of like an obsolete, um, uh, uh, antiquated way of thinking. We've since had other policies, U.S. policies that sort of distanced, redefined what was called the Monroe Doctrine. Then the Monroe Doctrine was a 19th century doctrine. It was a policy that was, even when you consider its history, the way it was engineered, developed. It was actually really it was an ad hoc, almost impulsive thing. The Secretary of State of Monroe at the time was John Quincy Adams, and there had been this conflict between about, bringing the British along. The British had been trying to pressure the U.S. to have a bilateral, some kind of bilateral uh, uh, speech, proclamation, declaration concerning activities, their presence and policies in Latin America or in the Americas, in the Western Hemisphere. Just sort of uh, to foreclose, to forestall and preclude other European powers, the French and whatnot. And John Quincy Adams, sort of sidestepped the British and, convinced, James Monroe, who was president at the time, to, make this unilateral declaration of U.S. intent. And, so it was sort of an ad hoc, accidental, incidental, policy declaration. Since then, we've distanced ourselves from that doctrine, and of course, Latin America has since become independent and their own people, and they've had their own, their own ideas. Monroe Doctrine. You obviously you can't tell. You couldn't tell Fidel Castro when he was leading Cuba about the Monroe Doctrine, right? That is clearly failed with Fidel Castro in power in Cuba at the time, and we're having a similar thing with Nicolas Maduro, who of course has since succeeded the more militant Hugo Chavez, who was also socialist leaning, right? So the Monroe Doctrine has since had, there have been other policies like the Good Neighbor policy, and there have been other things. But this guy is talking about the Monroe Doctrine, talking about free and fair elections. And by the way, he goes into the origin, the provenance of this attempted invasion, this failed invasion. And he talked about these business interests, right, who had backed him, and he had this contract that he'd signed that if in the event this was successful, he'd be paid $213 million. But he's in a self-righteous tone. He was talking about wanting free and fair elections for for Venezuelans, of course, backed by CIA. He claimed the CIA was involved in this, that he claimed, Donald Trump was involved. One of the people who was captured, claimed in an interview, he's been held in Venezuela. While he was being held there, he did say that Jordan Goodrow was under the direction of President Donald Trump. That was President Donald Trump's first tenure. Again, the government has since denied this, right? Now, Jordan Goodrow was referring to Venezuela as a narco state, Of course, recently with the strike on the boats, the vessels off the coast of Venezuela by the U.S. military, the Trump administration declared an all-out war. That we're in a non-international war with narco terrorists, with international, and so you can see there does seem to, Jordan Goodrow seems to be spewing uh, some kind of anecdotes from this playbook of referring to Latin American states as narco states. By the way, Venezuela is actually, uh, despite its economic situation, its precarious economic situation, due to its form of government and, of course, its hostility and with the West, particularly America. Venezuela actually is the country with the richest oil reserves. It has the largest proven oil reserves in the world of any states, even more than Saudi Arabia, right? So it's you can call it a petrodollar state. It should be a petrodollar state, but it hasn't gotten its act together. It should be a very, very wealthy state, one of the wealthiest in the world, because it actually has the richest oil reserves, proven oil reserves in the world. Um, so, so this guy was talking about how there are these business interests. He was saying global governments was something he was referring to in his interview, and he was saying these business interests. He mentioned a Rowan Kraft who's supposed to be heir to the Kraft fortune, the billionaire, and he was talking about these people who were involved in backing the coup attempts, the overthrow of Nicolas Maduro, and after that, of course, they're supposed to have drilling rights and business rights if the coup were successful. By the way, this guy seems to be clueless that there actually there are laws in effect, right? Of a government overthrowing the another sovereign government uh, is a violation of international law. Of course, that's why the whole world, the international community, has been censuring Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It violates international law, right? Of course, America does its stuff in through covert operations in clandestine fashion, and he's dealing with the CIA. He claims to be dealing with the CIA. Again, the CIA has what's called plausible deniability. They had it in the 60s during the Bay of Pigs, and of course they still have it now. Plausible deniability, those are, again, espionage is actually illegal. It's illegal. Those are illegal operations. But the US pursues its interests. Its interests are paramount to the American people, to the American government, and so it will pursue its interests through whatever means. In any event, assassination of any political assassinations have been banned by the U.S. government. No U.S. employee is supposed to be involved in political assassinations. The United States has disavowed political assassinations. First of all, with the administration of President Gerald Ford, with the exposure of the numerous assassination attempts on Fidel Castro. It is said that he survived over 600 assassination attempts. The CIA has claimed that it sanctioned only 8, right, assassination attempts on Fidel Castro. So the U.S. government has prohibited the involvement of any government employee and any American in political assassinations. Of course, Americans would act as they, as they want to. Jordan Goodrow was a mercenary, a private. He calls himself the euphemism to use is a private contractor, and so his job was to go in, provide the muscle, and go and overthrow the government of Nicolas Maduro. Now, he claimed, though, that they weren't going to assassinate. He said they were going to overthrow the government and just capture him. Now, he said he claimed his other backers. He was acting with a very popular, a very known, and he's exiled now, a known political consultant who's backed a pretender president. His name is Juan Guaido. It's interesting. I think he's an alum of my school, George Washington University, Don't quote me on that, but from the previous research I've done, I think if he's the same person, his government was recognized by President Donald Trump, but of course, Mr. Nicolas Maduro is the one who has power, who has authority. He's the president of Venezuela, and so this guy, uh, Jordan Goudreau, he claimed that the objective was to, overthrow Nicolas Maduro, and then they would just capture him and hand him over to the authorities. I guess that would have been the authorities of J.J. Rendon or what's his name, Juan Guaido, who would have the uh, presumptuous president, and he would have, taken over power. Now, so it's just like when American U.S. forces captured Saddam Hussein and handed him over to the provisional government of Iraq or whatever, and they executed him. So of course, if the if Jordan Goudreau captured Nicolas Maduro and um, handed him over to his rivals' government, and they executed him, he would have still facilitated the execution, the assassination of a foreign government. It would still be violating the laws of the United States. He'd be in a conspiracy to assassinate, to kill a foreign leader, despite the fact that he claimed that he didn't do it. It was his people who did it. Um, in any event, so he planned and trained some people, about 60 people in Colombia, and with the assistance of two of his Green Beret buddies who have been captured and are still in Venezuela. Um, and of course, they landed. There was a leak, I suppose, to the Venezuelan authorities had a leak of the undertaking, and they were defeated, and it was an embarrassment. So hence it's called the Bay of Piglets. So it doesn't. It's a foreshadow of the original Bay of Pigs. Now, and let me, as I said, nothing's new under the sun. This happened in John F. Kennedy's administration. To be fair to President John F. Kennedy, he inherited the planned invasion of Cuba and the attempted overthrow of Fidel Castro's government from President Dwight Eisenhower, uh, and who was the 34th president. Um, so the Bay of Pigs, the CIA with 1,400 Cuban exiles who were discontent, and with the Castro regime, and and also some mafia. It's not new. The U.S. government has worked with the mafia before. Prior to that, remember, during the Second World War, Lucky Luciano, who was chairman of the commission, who was the most powerful man in the mafia, he'd been given over 30 years in prison by Thomas Dewey, the prosecutor who went on to become governor of New York. But the U.S. Navy, the U.S. government approached Lucky Luciano to help in the invasion of Sicily during the Second World War, and if he could provide the contacts to the Cosa Nostra, and to also help in securing the New York dock, so that the ships weren't sabotaged. They would commute his sentence, help him, and so eventually he was released from prison, but deported for life to back to Sicily, and so it has happened before. So during the Bay of Pigs, the CIA did work with the mafia. The mafia had a business interest. So again, just like in the Operation Gideon in 2020, it was business interests who wanted to have access to Venezuela's oil, and the subsequent enterprises they could set up in Venezuela if they could overthrow the socialist leaning government of Nicolas Maduro. So back then it was a mafia. The mafia owned very lucrative hotels, casinos, brothels in Cuba, and with the the regime of the left-leaning uh, uh, Fidel Castro, he nationalized these businesses, and he drove the mafia out of business. So the mafia were eager to kick him out. By the way, there were these very hilarious uh, ways that the mafia and the CIA attempted to actually kill Fidel Castro, including poisoning his cigars, using women, his lovers, to attempt to poison him. But they would not be able to poison. They would not be able to kill him, and they would admit to their intent. And it's interesting. He lived to be a nonagenarian. That's Fidel Castro. He lived into his 90s, and he died of natural causes. He outlived his enemies, his detractors. It's and they never succeeded. Over 600 assassination attempts. So the Bay of Pigs, in any event, was foiled. The 1400 Cuban exiles who attempted to, who they landed, and they had expected um, that if they could strike the the air power of Cuba, and they could have an amphibious landing, it would trigger a a nationalist uprising, that the people would rise up against Castro. It didn't go as they planned, and of course they expected that the U.S. military would help with air power, firepower, but JFK changed his mind, in the last minutes, for whatever reasons. And of course, uh, when we look at the administration of number 45 and 47, it appeared that they threw um, Jordan Goodrow under the bus, because actually the U.S. government last year, July 2024, he was actually charged. He was arrested and indicted, charged with arms trafficking, from because he trained um, the dissidents, Venezuelan dissidents, and the militia he was going to use for the that he used for the invasion in Colombia. And so the U.S. government charged Jordan Goodrow, the hapless Jordan Goodrow, with arms trafficking and several other counts as well. He wasn't operating an export license, so he had about 14 counts and whatnot. So as I said, nothing is new under the sun. I'm so happy that I'm giving that quote today. You can look it up in the Bible, Ecclesiastes, the book of Ecclesiastes, 1 verse 9. It was written, or supposedly written by King Solomon. Right? It's the one of the wise wisdom books of the Bible. So I think I've pretty much covered uh, the parallel, and just pointing out that although yes, the government, although it's disavowed this, and the fact that uh, the government is violating international law with attacks, foreign invasions of an attempted overthrow of foreign governments, and of course these attacks on international waters. America has long declared a war on narcotics, and it does look like the military strikes on these boats off the coast of Venezuela, they seem, uh, while not immediately related, but the fact that it's close to Venezuela, and the fact that the chief actor, the architect, the hapless Jordan Goodrow, the special forces guy, ex Green Beret, the fact that he referred to Venezuela as a narco state. He may have done that just to be in alignment with the government's declared war on uh, narco terrorism. I don't know. Um, in any event, I want to cut this short here, and as I said earlier, that it's not new that we have a president who's been labeled as a king. We've had King Andrew, that's Andrew Jackson, who was named a king during his time, and regarding foiled invasions, which was what I was talking about today. We have the Bay of Piglets of May 3, May 4, 2020 of the first Trump administration. You can find its parallel in history with the foiled Bay of Pigs under President John F. Kennedy. And the fact that this government has disavowed any involvement, while the participant Jordan uh, Goodrow has claimed the CIA, he had the backing of the CIA, he acted on their direction. Well, that happened as well. The disavowal by the US government happened under the administration of President Kennedy. Uh, Fortunately, the fallout, the blowback from the foiled Bay of Pigs is not occurring now. The blowback then was that uh, not only that Fidel Castro became, more entrenched in Cuba and more popular, and it appeared that he defeated an incompetent and aggressive U.S. administration. That was how it appeared that time, which was aggressive and incompetent in foreign policy. But um, it triggered the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, and we almost suffered uh, Armageddon, a nuclear apocalypse that was just narrowly averted, and we only got to know later on from that there was a Russian hero. We only got to know much years later from declassified KGB and Russian information that a guy called Vitaly, I think is it Arkhipov, his name. Arkhipov, I can't pronounce his name, but Vitaly A, I'll call him Vitaly A. He was a hero who averted a nuclear crisis, a nuclear war in 1962 with the standoff in the Cuban Missile Crisis that followed. Of course, it also drove Cuba into the arms and of the USSR, and I don't know what the blowback of uh, you know the failed Bay of Piglets would be. Of course, that's been 5 years ago, but if I can research and find out what it is, I will keep you posted. My name is Olurotimi Osha. I like talking about American presidents. Today, I just talked about uh, the Operation Gideon, and which the Trump administration has disavowed, and did an analogy with the failed Bay of Pigs under President John F. Kennedy. I also draw attention to color of law violations pivoting on subordination of perjury and fraud on the courts. Of course, I was swatted on May 16, 2023 by rogue cops of Montgomery County, Maryland, and the state attorney then filed false charges, so prosecutorial misconduct, false charges to protect the police officers who drugged me, shot me in the head, assaulted me, and committed a robbery under color of law. They stole my wristwatches, my luxury items, my cash, my credit cards, my things in my home, destroyed my property, my Ray-Bans, my luxury items were stolen, my apartment was destroyed. And there's been a judge who's been protecting them, Judge James Bonifant of Montgomery County. I've had no trial. It's going on 3 years now, and I've been wrongfully detained. My 14th Amendment rights were violated when Judge Bonifant actually said he wanted me to lose my job. I had a job at the Pentagon. It was a six-figure job, and Judge Bonifant placed me under house arrest, placed a GPS on my ankle at that time. So it was in 2023. Even though I was a victim, he filed, of course, the state attorney had filed false charges against me. The man, Jide, who had perjured an emergency evaluation petition and filed, to get me swatted. He had gotten an attorney, and that attorney was making misrepresentations in court. His attorney's name's Steve Mercer. He was making misrepresentations so the judge could keep me under false arrest. In any event, I will be vindicated, as Dr. Martin Luther King is said to have said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but in the end it bends towards justice. I will get justice by the grace of God, and I'll keep you posted. Thank you.